My name is Richard Fisher. I am the publisher of Inside Unmanned Systems. We are broadcasting live from the Xponential 24 Day 3 from our booth live. I am here with our guest today is Tom Furey, Chief Executive Officer of Sagetech. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Glad to be here and excited for the last day of the show.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. It's been an intense one this year. So, Tom, you've been Sagetech is a brand that many are familiar with. You've been coming to this event now for how long now?
Me personally, 8 years. I think in a row.
Okay, yeah. So, and Sagetech Avionics. Let's talk about give us a little, our audience, a bit of sense of the history of Sagetech. How did they evolve, and tell us a little bit more about the company and also your primary technology focus.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the history, right?
Please,
That'll get us to where we are today and why. And it's interesting because you say Sagetech. There's actually two Sagetechs. There aren't today. But the Sagetech Corporation was a company that no longer exists. But that company it grew up in a place called the Columbia River Gorge. Did a lot of work supporting, as many small companies did, supporting a company called In Situ, which was first In Situ, and now it's Boeing In Situ, right? And that company did a bunch of things: engine dynamometer testing, composites, electronics. And around 2009 or something like that, In Situ came to Sagetech Corporation. I wasn't there yet, so them, not me.
Okay.
And said, hey, you know what? Our customers told us these small drones are great. They're stealthy. They can slip in enemy territory. They're made of composites. They're 45 pounds or whatever. But then they come home and we can't see them on radar, and it's a problem. They crash into a KC-130, and we have an issue with that.
That is a problem.
The solution to that is a transponder. 29, a transponder was the size of a cinder block and weighed about 15 pounds. They said, we can't put that on a 40-pound airplane. Can you help? So Sagetech Corporation developed the first micro transponder. It was a circuit card custom made for an earlier version of the Scan Eagle. Then we commercialized that into business cards size and have continued to evolve it.
And when you say continue to evolve, it's driving size, weight, power.
Yes, and functionality and certifiability, right?
Okay.
So the first transponder, the XP transponder, was a Mode C transponder, and it worked great. And for those who don't know, it just says, I'm here and this is my altitude.
Yeah.
And then it evolved to an XPS, which was a Mode S transponder, which took GPS information and gave the interrogator more information about it. And then added ADS-B, part of Next Gen, which then broadcast that out. And I like those. The first two are interrogation response, kind of like Marco Polo.
Yep.
The second one's kind of like, if you ever remember Horton Hears a Who. We're here, we're here, we're here. Just a few times a second, just shouting out that you're here so people can passively hear that. So that was the evolution of the technology to the XPS. And then in 2019, Sagetech Corporation and all the different things it did, the owner said, hey, I'm going to sell some of these assets.
Okay.
So some investors bought what I thought were the important part of the assets, the transponder avionics assets. I became CEO. So in late 2019, Sagetech Avionics was born. Sagetech Corporation has since gone away. We've continued that evolution through now not just adding functionality, so both military IFF functionality, new modes of military IFF functionality, but also certified technology, because that's important for us to create something that is guaranteed to assist with the safety case of airspace. Sure. And we're all about airspace safety. So in 2021, we got the first Mode 5 IFF micro IFF, small IFF transponder certified on our MX-12B platform. And then in 2022, that same hardware platform, but with different software, firmware, and functionality, got FAA TSOs on Mode S, ADS-B, and pressure altitude encoding. So that's how we've evolved it. Now we're working towards adding ACAS-X-based collision avoidance, because it leverages that technology, the ADS-B and transponder technology, to provide a key part of the beyond visual line of sight tech stack for being able to provide collision avoidance to piloted aircraft and DAA to unpiloted aircraft.
Sure. So you mentioned IFF. Let's step back a second and talk about identify friend or foe.
Yep.
Explain to our viewers kind of what the history of the IFF is, where we are in terms of adopting IFF. What are the drivers of adoption for IFF? What's the safety case essentially?
Yep.
And then what are the constraints? Why haven't we seen more adoption by 2024? And what does the future look like for the role of IFF in both in theater ops and civil aviation?
Sure. Hey, Richard, you ask me a question like that, and I like to talk, and you say I've got a time limit. Those things are almost incompatible, but I'll try and be somewhat succinct, right?
Okay.
So I'll start with...
Well, take your time.
And literally, I'll take this back to 1940s, right?
Oh, here we go.
But I won't take long to get back to today.
Here we go.
But you said, what's the origin of IFF? And this is actually
did.
the origin of all transponders. So it was the British... and you can imagine, you've got airplanes coming at you, you've got 1940s technology radar that sees blips, and they said, gee, we got to know whether those are our boys coming home or whether those bombers coming to take us out.
Yeah.
So they invented IFF at the time, the transponder, and really all it does was it amplified the radar return. So the radar would come in. Now it's since evolved how the technology works, but that was the origins of IFF. And a funny story is they put them on the airplane and they had a little, you turn it on and off with a little switch between the pilot's seat, but there was also a self-destruct button there. And they'd have some pilots kind of basically light off a hand grenade between their legs on the flight home. We won't go into that. So that was IFF. That evolved both into our modern transponder technology.
So talk about an adoption driver.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. So that's what drove both commercial use and military use.
I did not know that.
And IFF is differentiated. So in military we talked about, or in commercial we talked about Mode A, which says, this is who I am. Mode C says, this is my altitude. And Mode S says, here's all that GPS stuff that you want to know. IFF on the military side, identify friend or foe. Our transponder does some decryption and then is connected to an NSA super secret password encryption thing that decrypts the interrogation, says, oh, this is what you want to know, re-encrypts the response and sends it back. So now the interrogator gets same information as you would get from air traffic control about the airplane, but more importantly that, yes, this is a NATO-friendly aircraft.
Got it.
And so Mode 5 is the most recent incarnation of that. That was started with GPS and with better encryption
and M-code
in the late 90s, and now using M-code GPS to feed it. It's taken from the final development in the early part of this millennium until 2020 was the mandate across NATO that said we're going to use Mode 5. And in June of 2020 is when the NSA said we're no longer doing Mode 4 codes, right? So now everybody, US, NATO, and allied nations use this Mode 5, and it's being adopted. I don't even think it's done yet, but across those. But for the most part, all manned aviation uses Mode 5. Some larger UAS use Mode 5. And I think one of the challenges we have is Mode 5 is the right technology to help protect ourselves in all airspace, right?
Sure.
In combat airspace, right?
Sure. Yeah.
In all aircraft, regardless of their size. And we need to work on making sure to modify both the ConOps, the concept of operations, as well as continuing to evolve the technology so that it is useful to prevent the tragedies that we discussed earlier, Richard, like Tower 22 in Jordan.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, earlier this year, right?
Yeah.
Tower 22 in Jordan, U.S. soldiers, first Army deaths by aerial attack since the Korean War.
Oh, man.
And that happened because
that is tragic.
We had a drone coming back at the same time that an enemy drone came in. We couldn't distinguish between the two, and I'm not privy to the details of the investigation, but essentially we didn't distinguish between the two. It came in without being defended against, killed 3 soldiers, wounded I think like 47 or so more. IFF is a technology that could have prevented that. Now you asked about the challenges, and the challenges are, as we get smaller in drone size, even our tiny little Mode 5 solutions, which are the size of a deck card, are too big and too expensive and too heavy. So we need to make the technology smaller, which we can do.
But for the small UAS, that is indeed a consideration. But for larger platforms, you've got talk to us about the retrofit. Talk to us about the, we MOSA everything these days, so the modularity. How does it integrate right now? What is the retrofit process like now? How easy or difficult? Is it a constraining factor?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, and it depends, right? But for the most part, it's not a constraining factor.
Right.
So we'll take a platform that, well, most UAS customers that we have today are targeting both the defense and the commercial industry,
Right.
or defense and other government,
and
civil industries, right? And you can't use
non-DoD government.
Yeah, you can't use Mode 5 IFF outside of DoD. It's for DoD use only. So how do you handle that? And we talked about MOSA, right? And for us, we have the same hardware that is the MXS civil transponder with ADS-B in and out.
Yeah.
And it's also the MX-12B military IFF transponder. So it does all the civil modes, but then adds the military Mode 5 and the different levels of that. With capabilities. So from our perspective, how we help with the MOSA challenge and the retrofit challenge is if you're a drone manufacturer, you've got commercial customers, you pop in the MXS. Now, there's an integration, and we work with our customers every day on that integration to connect to the autopilot or to the mission computer, to get it physically integrated, to get the antenna placed, etc. So the beauty of ours is you've got a drone that you're selling for a civil government application, use our MXS. You got the same drone that you're going to sell to a DoD application, pop out the MXS, put in the MX-12B, there's no further integration required, you add the crypto, you're done. Right?
Wow, interesting.
So that's how we like to build things to make it easier for our customers, because we know they're targeting everywhere they can sell a drone, they want to try and sell a drone.
Well, yeah, and they're positioning themselves as dual-use technology frequently, and what kind of differentiates that, and quite frankly, it's what you just described, Mode 5. So let's talk more about adoption of Mode 5 for small UAS.
Yeah.
Some of the programs of record are driving, we've got new kind of operational requirements. We were talking earlier about FTUAS, Increment 1 and Increment 2, and how those kind of MOSA requirements are really driving this kind of new philosophy, very frankly. We've seen the recent news out of DIU. There is a greater willingness and urgency to really partner with private sector to develop a set of capabilities, not just to develop, to certify and deploy capabilities in pretty short order. How does that affect your work with Mode 5 within the market? Is that a help, a benefit, or is that part of why you think that frankly, the technical case you're making is being heard and acted upon right now?
Yeah.
Can you share your thoughts on that, Tom?
For one thing is when you talk about how DIU and all of the other, there's all the works, right? SoftWorks and AFWorks, and you name it, right? They're all trying to say, how can DoD break out of what it's been in decades, right? In the DoD acquisition cycle, which takes forever and palms 5 years down the road, et cetera, because that doesn't lend itself to take advantage of the innovations that are occurring in industry, right? How can they do that? So what we do is we make our military versions an iteration of and build on top of our commercial innovation, right? So we look at, that's why the MXS is a civil transponder. Well, let's just add Mode 5 to that rather than creating something different, right? We look, and we'll talk later maybe about collision avoidance. How can we take collision avoidance in DAA systems and incorporate Mode 5 into that for defense use? So now it's not truly a dual use, but the underlying platform is a dual-use platform, right?
Understood.
Different iterations.
Got it.
So, and when you talked about the Mode 5 adoption, now that's a little different. So Mode 5 is known. Mode 5 is almost from a size kind of top down from the DoD, right? So all crewed aviation in DoD is outfitted with Mode 5 to identify as friendly. Mode 5's goal is to identify friends and prevent fratricide. The fratricide part is covered because crewed aircraft are all covered with Mode 5.
Sure.
But identifying friends on the drone side is we're still working on that, right? So the larger platforms, your Reapers, your CCAs, FTUAS, it's spec'd in. It's spec'd in as Mode 5 is a requirement for those. Below that, your SRRs, short-range reconnaissance, blue SUAS and stuff, there is no Mode 5 requirement. And to me, that's a problem that we collectively need to work on.
Why is that, do you think?
Why is it not?
Why is it not a requirement?
There's a few reasons. For one, there is some concern about spectrum, like with the FAA. But to be honest, you're not going to be as crowded.
Sure.
In a combat environment, we're not having combat over Newark when there's a lot of aircraft coming in, right? So I don't think it's really a spectrum concern, but it's a concern about a few things. First of all, even though our tiny size, weight, and power is tiny, when you've got a 5-pound drone, it's still too big, right?
Yeah, sure.
And while we're not that expensive for the value we bring, it's still too expensive for a small drone. So size, weight, power, cost. The ways to bring that down are also then new ConOps or new versions of the technology, variants of the technology. And we have some suggestions. That doesn't mean they're the only ways, but also assist with the other problem, which is, I mentioned that super secret crypto computer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that is a very controlled device, right? We don't deal in that. Our customers get that usually directly through the government. We don't want that to get in the hands of the enemy. Now, an FTOAS asset is less likely to get in the hands of the enemy than a over-the-hill drone that we're going to throw out there. So to help improve the counter-UAS solution, help protect ourselves, we need to put some version of IFF on that small drone, but without the crypto. And there are ways to take that crypto and either put it at the ground control station, do some things in RAM so there's no concern that the algorithm is going to be lost, put some RAM. But there are ways to do that, and that's where we should be focusing so that we can prevent Tower 22.
Sure.
And we can also lean into what we're learning in Ukraine. What we're learning in Ukraine is that drones are a huge portion of that combat airspace. We're, quote, getting as close to darkening the skies with drones as we've ever been in that combat airspace. And there's a lot of fratricide of drones. So it's not really fratricide. There's a lot of blue-on-blue engagement, shooting down friendly drones. We put IFF on that. That's why we need to get on the small aircraft.
And that's a unique, let's face it, that's a unique set of conditions, okay? Because Ukraine is working with virtually every manufacturer that I know, well, lots of them, and many that are known and unknown. We were talking to people, they fly into Poland, they walk across the border. I mean, the way you work with, I mean, it's been remarkable. The number of companies, the number of platforms that are getting tested there. So let's hope not that. Let's hope that won't be a model, or it's indicative. It won't become the standard and paradigm for future.
But it's something we should be
small UAS engagement.
We should be prepared for.
No doubt. And the nature of the asymmetrical threat and the nature of the FPV. Nobody, 5 years ago, nobody was talking about FPV, type of drone delivering a grenade.
And we weren't talking so loud about counter UAS, and that's where I think Mode 5 can help automate the counter UAS solution.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, no doubt. Tom, before I let you go, I got to ask you about how does IFF kind of integrate into AI-driven autonomy? We're seeing a great deal of autonomous development in systems. CCA just announced their down select this morning. There's been much discussion and excitement and questions about Replicator, but nonetheless, we're seeing and cover feature of Inside Unmanned Systems. We're talking about AI-enabled autonomy in defense. How do you view what is the opportunity for IFF? And some of your capabilities to be integrated or have some impact on future autonomous solutions?
So on one hand, IFF can be like the landing gear. It's on, it's off, it's just a normal thing that AI helps drive and turn. But importantly, so one of the concerns about IFF is you don't want to be over enemy territory broadcasting.
Indeed.
And it's an RF signal that you're sending out. And regardless of whether they can decipher it, they still know it's coming there, right? So AI can help determine when to turn it on and when to turn it off. In a swarming environment, it can kind of, I could see where it could assign somebody to be the IFF transmitter. When I used to fly in the Navy, we'd fly in formation and only one person would have their IFF on and the rest of the formation would turn it off. But if you peeled off, you would turn it on. Well, that's a human intelligence that's what AI will do, and that's how I think it'll integrate. We will be
Got it.
something that can provide some information back,
Yeah.
and then we could go further, but it's not there yet, right?
Got it.
But Mode 5 is an encrypted means of communication. There are messaging in there that can be used for secure transmissions back and forth between different aspects of a swarm, between a logistics delivery drone and the soldier on the ground. There can be communication
Sure.
via the Mode 5 channel. That's how I see it kind of can interoperate within an AI environment.
Yeah, because the reason I ask is that much of the assumption on the operational requirements for these AI-enabled autonomous solutions, the presumption is you're in a GNSS denied environment.
Yep.
You've got no comms, no data links.
Right.
You know, and so any capability that can kind of help.
Yeah, that can be there for,
mit-
and we talked, and we'll probably talk at a different time about ACAS, right? But
Yeah.
but even in this environment, layers are important, right? You can't,
Indeed.
You can't be the single point of failure, right? So maybe Mode 5 isn't the way to communicate within a swarm or in a manned-unmanned teaming environment, but if it can be a backup, and if there's a way to do that, and AI can intelligently say, hey, I've got to switch to that modes of communication,
There you go.
that's what it could be. That's another way it could be used. And again, I'm not saying it is, but it absolutely could be, and I think we need to look holistically across the platform to say, how do we have that kind of redundancy in place for all the things we're trying to do? And then that gives us the freedom to turn the things off we don't want to use when we don't want to use them. Right?
Well, and redundancy has been, it's the approach for safety critical aviation.
Absolutely.
Forever, right? So
Yeah.
that's not unusual. Tom, I want to thank you for your
My pleasure.
For sharing your perspective with us today, and we'll see you on the next live stream. That's all for now. Thanks.
Okay.